Adauchi. It is a Japanese word for vengeance, depending on how reliable Google Translate is. Everyone hearing or reading this has felt the desire for revenge, whether to a petty slight such as being cut off in traffic, or a far greater trouble involving physical or mental harm. In old Japan, however, a subtle disparagement could see your head leaving your body, and even justice for a fallen kinsman could lead to decades of blood feuds, leaving many dead in a torrent of blood and torn sinew. Don't get me wrong, I am not a violence is never the answer kind of guy. Some bitches have it coming, and I hope they burn in hell. But revenge is a meal that tends to keep going around the table until everyone is dead from its poison, or someone decides to let it pass and get up from the table. I suppose you could also manage to kill off all the guests and their bloodlines to ensure no further retribution against you. But then you'd have the law to deal with as well. Best not to engage in such nonsense unless you've planned it out properly and are ready to possibly walk the Corpseroad at your journey's end. Close your eyes, unless you're driving. Don't be a twat. And let's go back to Japan in the year 1630. The place is Okayama, in the Chugoku region of Honshu. This place was home to Watanabe Gendayu, a favored retainer of Daimyo Ikeda Tadao. For clarification, a retainer is not the abhorrent but extremely useful contraption you wore in your mouth as an adolescent. No, think more like a second-in-command or a Hand of the King from Game of Thrones. Retainers were responsible for running the affairs of the land while the daimyo was away on campaign or dealing with the shogun's nonsense in the country's capital. It was a reasonably big dick position, and unfortunately, dick may have been the reason for Watanabe's untimely demise. Watanabe was friends with a fellow samurai by the name of Kawai Matagoro. What the level of that friendship was is unclear, but whatever it was, Matagoro desired more, according to the few sources I could find. You all are great for listening to this, but this is an unpaid gig, so forgive me if I don't pay $42 for one page out of a history PDF book for further clarification. To get right to it, Matagoro liked the way Watanabe's ass looked in his hakama pants and decided to shoot his shot to get at it. On the other hand, Watanabe was not interested, either because he had another lover or wife, or just wasn't in the mood to grate some yams together to make lube for a 30-second affair. That lube is called Tororo Jiru, by the way. Learn something new every day, don't you? So, Watanabe left Kawai's DM unanswered, and when confronted face-to-face, likely after both having one too many drinks at the local bar, ultimately rebuffed his advances and probably told him to fuck off. Kawai, unable to deal with rejection and pissed that he had already mashed some yams together only to have to now eat them off of a plate instead of an ass, proceeded to murder Watanabe out of rage. Then, knowing that his goofy ass was totally screwed if he remained in Okayama, he fled to Edo, sheltered by a Hatamoto, a samurai in direct service to the shogun, named Ando Masayoshi. Infuriated by losing one of his best men, Ikeda Tadao sought to bring Matagoro to justice, but his calls for retribution went unanswered, likely due to Kawai's connections in the government. So finally, in 1632, the daimyo went to his grave, giving these final words.
For my memorial service above everything else, offer on my behalf the head of Kawai Matagoro.
I don't know what moved the shogun to act. Perhaps he felt the need to honor Ikeda, or Kawai was just a fucking moron he no longer wished to deal with. Still, shortly after learning of Ikeda's death, the shogun ordered Kawai Matagoro into exile. This meant that he could no longer be protected, and the shogun effectively gave the green light for revenge to the brother of Watanabe Gendayu, 18-year-old Watanabe Kazuma. So naturally, Kazuma leapt at the chance for payback, leaving the service of the Ikeda family and tracking his brother's killer. For as much as he desired to skull-fuck Matagoro's corpse, Kazuma was not a fool. He knew that Matagoro would still have friends and supporters, and Kazuma would need all the help he could get. Fortunately, a master swordsman by the name of Araki Mateman was in the mood for putting half his sandal right up some rich cunt's asshole, and decided he and 2 of his men would aid young Kazuma. They likely tracked him for up to 2 years, always coming up short, but never doubting they would catch him. Matagoro couldn't have slept well, probably dreaming of a blade inching closer and closer to his neck every night. Then again, he may not have been that introverted, thought no one could touch him, and continued to drink wine off some prostitute's balls most of the time. Eventually, Kazuma and his crew learned the route Matagoro was taking, and decided to wait for him at the Kagia crossroads in Igagoe. Ice gripped the soil under their feet as it was the 7th of November, 1634. It would soon be thawed by hot blood and viscera. The men awaited Matagoro's entourage in a nearby shop, as he'd recently left Osaka, and would pass by this location. As Matagoro's group came closer to the shop, Araki and the others burst from the establishment and attacked. Araki would engage in combat with the uncle of Matagoro, Kawai Jinzaemon. Jinzaemon lunged forward to strike Araki's heart, but the samurai dodged the attack, repositioning to Jinzaemon's left side and slashing his abdomen. Stupefied that his intestines were now pouring across the frost-ridden earth, and likely regretting that he didn't stay home that day and play GTA 5, he could only mumble out a curse before Araki's blade tore through his spinal column and severed his windpipe. Then Araki teabagged him. Maybe not, but perhaps he did. You don't know, and I don't either, so go with it. With the uncle dead, Araki proceeded to help the others by killing other men who were foolish enough to block their way to Matagoro. It is said that Araki sent at least 36 men to the underworld that day, but according to historian Stephen Turnbull, that is probably an exaggerated number. Whatever the number, boots went to asses, and eventually the duel between Kazuma and Matagoro could begin. Duel, you say? Yes. As Kazuma was the one with the grievance toward Matagoro by law, he was the one that had to settle it. The others were not allowed to interfere. Araki stepped aside and waited with his men, and what was left of Matagoro's group honored the law and stepped aside. They did this because they had to abide by the law and the samurai code if they wanted to get Matagoro a pardon if he won. Pushed next to Kazuma by Araki, Matagoro drew his blade, and their battle commenced. For 6 grueling hours they fought, the sound of their blades and their cries of fury and anguish being the only thing heard throughout the village. They would sprawl around in the bloody mud and bodily fluids of the men that died that day, barely able to stand, but knowing if they did not, the other would gain the advantage, and they would join this carrion flesh scattered around their arena. Araki, from the sidelines, would encourage Kazuma, yelling at him with his gruff voice to be the samurai he knew he could be, and to honor his brother by ending this fool's existence. Matagoro starts to feel the tide turn against him and tries to run, but Araki prevents his escape. The time for running was over. Kazuma, with renewed vigor, strikes out with all his strength, slicing through Matagoro's leg and hitting an artery. Before Matagoro could react, he began to fall. Before he touched the ground, the last thing he saw was a blood-soaked Kazuma, a sword swinging into his neck, and the sky and earth spinning as his head left his body. Kazuma stood victorious. His brother and his honor were avenged. Araki, Kazuma, and the others submitted themselves to the government and reported their vendetta, as per the law, or they'd be considered criminals. As there is no mention of them being regarded as criminals, the shogun probably gave them a thumbs up and free hookers and beer at the best Edo pubs. This event was so badass that it was recorded in the official chronicle of the government and is one of the 3 major Adauchi incidents in Japan. It's hard to let a good tale of payback get swept under the rug of history. Our time together ends on that note. You may now open your eyes or unass your toilet. Until next time.